6 p.m. Madam Secretary, would you please do a roll call for determination of a quorum, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Vrooman.
Here.
Vice Chair Wojcik. Commissioner LaPaglia.
Here.
Commissioner DeSena.
Here.
Let the record reflect all commissioners with the exception of Vice Chair Wojcik is out with an excused absence.
We also do not have Commissioner Beamish here.
And Commissioner Beamish.
So we have 3 present and two not
Correct.
here. With that, moves us on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all please stand, face the nation's flag, and I'm going to ask Commissioner DeSena, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So this now moves us on to the approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Seeing none.
Okay, I'd like to call for a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
Motion. And I'll second. Do we want to do it on the computer screen or?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see. Is it up?
I believe so.
Oh,
Do you have it recorded?
yes.
I haven't seen mine yet. I see the mover and the seconder.
Let's see.
I do not.
Commissioner DeSena and I have it on our screen and made a motion in second.
And I'll make a motion. I will vote to approve. If you've already cast your votes for it. Yeah, I don't have it on my screen, but I'll verbally give you cast my vote to approve the agenda.
Okay, motion carries unanimously 3-0.
Okay, with that, that brings us on to public comments. At this time, we'll take public comments. Any person may address the Planning Commission on any subject pertaining to city business which does not relate to any item listed on the agenda or the consent calendar. Normally, no action may be considered or taken by the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Seeing none.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We're now moving on to the approval of the minutes. And the approval of the minutes that we have is for the February 12th, 2025 regular Planning Commission meeting as presented. Madam Secretary, are there any members of the public requesting to speak on the approval of the minutes?
Seeing none.
Okay, I'd like to call for a motion as second to approve the minutes. Now, just for historical purposes at this meeting, there was 3 of us present. There was myself, Commissioner Beamish, and Commissioner DeSena. So there are 2 of us here tonight. Looking for a motion and a second to approve or other options.
Well, question for City Attorney. So I was not here for the February 12th meeting and I have not read and reviewed the minutes. So I don't know if it's appropriate for me to.
We can take a moment for you to review the minutes now, and if you feel comfortable voting on them after that, then you can vote.
Or would if Chair Vrooman and Commissioner DeSena make a motion and a second, can I just abstain from it? And it would pass?
Would it pass on basically a
2-1?
2 with a 1 abstention?
Yes.
Okay.
I vote to approve the minutes.
I will second the vote to approve the minutes.
Motion carries 2 1 with the abstention of Commissioner LaPaglia.
That's just the motion. So I guess we need to cast a formal vote. I mean, the results, well, we'll see what the results are. Would you like a roll call, or do you want to try on the computer?
Let's do on the computer. Let's see. We're
All
good.
right, it worked.
Worked on the computer, and what were the results, Madam Secretary?
A motion carries 2-1 with the abstention of Commissioner LaPaglia.
Very good, thank you. So this now brings us to the public hearing of the tentative track map of the Gearson Ranch residential project. Are there any members of the Planning Commission that wishes to abstain or recuse themselves from this item? Seeing none, we'll move on to staff presentation. Staff, maybe we have a report, please.
Absolutely. Good evening, Chair Ruman and members of the Planning Commission. It's an honor to be able to present to you this evening. My name is Aaron Rintamaki, and welcome to tonight's edition of the staff report for tentative track map 39271. Just a moment while we load the slideshow here. All right, the project site may look familiar, and I'll explain in a moment. So since 2006, the site's general plan designation has been single-family residential, and also since 2006, the zoning has been single-family 2. Some of you may recall this site because on December 13th, 2023, the Planning Commission approved a parcel map and a development plan to build 107 homes. Tonight, we are talking about a tentative track map to subdivide the 15.85 acres into 107 condominium lots. So, I'd like to explain the background of this project and then move on to the proposal this evening. And as I mentioned earlier, on December 13th, 2023, the Planning Commission approved a parcel map to split this single parcel into 2. Adams Avenue and Washington Avenue were dedicated to provide the required street width. Parcel 1 would remain with the existing home, which is Esther's home, and parcel 2 would be developed. So, along with the parcel map, the Planning Commission approved the 107 single-family unit development plan with a park, drainage basin, and perimeter block walls. And I'd also like to show a view of what the streetscape would look like as we talk about single-family. So here we are on a streetscape of Gearson Ranch. Here is also another view, so we can see the style of the home, the separation, and then the green belt of the front yard. So now that the tentative parcel map showing the lot split into 2 parcels and the development plan to build the 107 homes are approved, tonight we are here to discuss the tract map. The proposal is a subdivision for 107 condominium units. The map shows the internal private streets created for access to the homes and for emergency services. This view of the map shows the lot configuration of the proposed tentative tract map. This map is consistent with the parcel map and the development plan approved by the Planning Commission on December 13th, 2023. There is no change to the number of the homes. The plotting of the homes is in the same location. The park and the water quality basin are in the same location, and the perimeter block wall is also in the same location. The applicant is requesting this tentative tract map so that they may subdivide the property and provide the ability for new families to purchase a new home and for a bank or a lending company to finance the new home, providing mortgage opportunities to new families and other interested home buyers. Without this map approval, these units would be rental units instead of for sale units. We did receive one public comment that was meant to be public to all, and that was forwarded to the Planning Commission. Staff did review this letter and recognized the elevation difference on Adams Avenue that was described. Engineering staff will be working with the applicant on final street improvement plans to ensure a safe roadway with this development. In response to the traffic comments, there was a traffic impact analysis prepared for the development plan in 2023. The traffic impact analysis showed that the study area intersections and the project driveways will operate at an acceptable level of the service for the city. Street improvement plans are being reviewed currently, and stop signs are shown on the plans for the A Street approach to both Adams Avenue and Washington Avenue. Regulatory speed limit signs are installed in the city streets based on requirements within the California Vehicle Code and the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. The Adams Avenue speed limit will be reviewed when the city performs the next speed ordinance update. And lastly, the commenter suggested that the main ingress and egress for this project be limited to Washington. In response, the project's main entrance and entry statement monumentation will be on Washington Avenue, and this will be the primary entrance for the project site. I'm sure you're familiar, but I'll just quickly restate that this project is subject to state law SB 330 and SB 30, streamlining for the entitlement process for housing developments. Under SB 330, the housing development projects can have a maximum of 5 public hearings before a decision is made. The 5 hearing limit is meant to expedite the approval process for housing. This project is at hearing number 4. So it's staff's recommendation this evening that the Planning Commission consider and approve the exemption for projects consistent with a community plan, CEQA section 151A3, and adopt a resolution of the Planning Commission approving this tentative tract map, subject to the conditions of approval found in Exhibit A. And that concludes staff's presentation. I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. With that, I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner LaPaglia. Do you have any questions of staff?
Thanks for the presentation, Aaron. You kind of highlighted that tonight we're just discussing the tract map for 107 units, so it can be, like you said, purchased by individuals instead of being like one large rental facility. Is that correct?
Yes, it would. Yes, the scenario is either one lot with all the homes on it where one property owner owns it and rents it out. Mm-hmm. And the alternative, which is this evening, which the developer would like to do, they'd like to draw the airspace lots so that they can sell them as individual homes to potential home buyers.
Sure. I mean, that seems to be probably, personally, like a more favorable option than having like a large rental unit. But tell me, what is like the paperwork difference between, I think I have this right, a tentative parcel map and the now tract map? So you're saying it was a tentative parcel map and now they're requesting it to be a tract map?
Yes. So I guess I'll describe it in 2 parts. So we have the one lot that was the large lot that we're looking at on the site over there.
Right.
And the proposal was to split the lot into two. So we have Esther's home and the remainder lot. And that is where we approve the development plan. Now the track map will come in and draw airspace lots around those units so that those can then be sold. So
Okay.
we needed to split the lot in two and then subdivide for the condominiums.
I see. So this is like a multi-step process. Like you had to do the first process of dividing it before being able to do a track map?
That is correct.
Okay. And this property has been zoned this way since 2006. The product's already approved, like everything's already done on that.
Yes, and so in 2023, we reviewed the development plan, which covered how the project will drain, what sort of traffic will be brought to the community as a result. And so those items were reviewed and discussed and found to be consistent already with our general plan.
Okay. Okay. And will the applicant present tonight?
The applicant will be available for questions, and they have reviewed the conditions of approval and accepted them.
Okay, great. Well, I don't want to, definitely don't want to ignore some of the requests on the, one of the letters that I read. So I could talk to the applicant later about just drainage and some concerns on, what was it, Brett Lane. So I'll hold the rest of my questions for the applicant, but that's all I have for now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner DeSena.
So this is probably my own ignorance. What is the difference between, you use interchangeably, condos versus single-family homes?
So a condominium simply refers to airspace that's not physical that you can touch. And single-family homes, I'll just say traditionally, as we're moving into the future, single-family homes traditionally would be on a lot that you physically can touch and own. And so, in a nutshell, a condominium is the airspace. It looks and functions just as a single-family home does, and for all intents and purposes, it is a single-family home. It's just a difference between being able to physically touch and own the land versus owning the airspace above it.
Okay, so basically the 15 acres is not owned necessarily by them. They're putting houses on them, and that's why they're called condominiums.
That is correct.
Okay. So on the property currently, there's a historic house that's there. So my question about that is, what is the plan for that? Second is, there's stuff around there. For instance, there's trees that are over 100 years old. There's artifacts inside that house, things along those lines. Is there any plan to salvage any of that?
So the original proposal to split the parcels into two was to allow Esther to keep her property as it was and have the new development built around it. So there wasn't any plan to have the home go away or change.
So it'll be intact?
It will be intact as long as the homeowner would like it to be.
Okay. So as far as keeping any of the stuff that's in there, because like we have a historic, city historic foundation and stuff like that, items in that home, is there a condition in which if they want to tear it down, that they have first right to that?
Commissioner DeSena, there will be a future point in time where someone will be interested in either removing that structure through a demolition permit, or they'd probably come in and subdivide the property and then demolish it after they get conditions of approval. But staff would subject that to an analysis. We would see, does that structure rise to a historic nexus with state law? Do the trees and other things have importance to that? Are there items as part of the structure that would be interesting to be salvaged if you put? That has not been done because this was complete avoidance, but that would occur at a future point in time. For this homeowner, I believe the request was that her property was isolated and not touched, and including the trees, that was very important to that property owner, was to keep it as intact as possible. And so respectfully, we can analyze that at a much later point in time.
Okay. When you talk about common recreation area, what will be the utilization for that common recreation And will that be open when you say common, is that common for the owners of the area or for the general public?
So the common recreation area will be for the residents who reside on the future Gearson Ranch, and they'll have outdoor amenities like a covered patio area, places to have a barbecue, an area to have outdoor engagement, like if you wanted to meditate or do yoga. There's a walking path around the whole site with different activities, mostly like length distances, so you know how far you're exercising, stuff like that.
Okay. And I think it's just worth mentioning that we did get, notified of a letter from a citizen, in the town. And they did have several concerns, some related to elevation issues. And I'm sure everyone has a copy of this letter that was proposed. For us and many people in Murrieta, we are kind of facing this traffic issue that goes on. And although I do understand that it's in the general plan, it's been voted on and all that, I'm just curious as far as the increase in traffic is going to be there, right? 107 units, roughly 3 to 5 bedroom homes, I'm guessing. So you could have potentially 2 to 3 cars in one house times 107. That's increased traffic on these roads. So were the roads designed for that increase in traffic?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, just a few follow-up questions. So just for kind of general knowledge, if you can go back to the slide where you actually show the zoning there from back in 2006, you have SF2 there, single family 2. So if you could kind of maybe share a little bit about that designation in comparison to, say, single family 1. It's been like this, so what's the difference?
Sure. So single family 1 and single family 2 are similar, but there are differences. And so some of the things I'd like to point out right away is that single family 1 has a little bit larger of a lot than single family 2 would have. Both of them permit single family homes, just as we're looking at here today. I think one of the differences between single family 1 and single family 2 is that single family 2 allows attached single family homes, whereas single family 1 would require them to all be detached. This product that we have here today is exciting because it is in fact detached. Mm-hmm. There is no attached walls there. There are some junior accessory dwelling units that are attached, but those are for young residents or someone you need to take care of, etc. But what's exciting about this project is these are single family homes, and that's something that we are not seeing recently.
So what the landowner could have done, would it, across from on Adams there, on the east side of Adams, there's a set of condos there further south right there of the project. But could that type of a style condominium complex, in theory, could have gone on this property?
In theory, that type of style could, yes. An all attached community could locate at that property.
Would that have been maybe potentially denser based upon that type of a style of a development?
So it would have to stay within the allowed density of single family 2, but if we're comparing the two projects, Gearson Ranch versus this theory one, Gearson Ranch would be lower in density than the attached product.
So basically this project is less dense than what it potentially could be.
That is correct.
Okay. And then also, we of course, I was here back in December of 2023 when we first saw this project. Has there been any type of substantive changes from back then to what we're seeing now as far as any changes with the project? Anything? I know we're just looking at the map, but anything with the size of the homes or anything? This all looks very similar to me from what I saw a year and a half ago.
It is all the same, and we are talking about the map only this evening, but to answer your question, there is a change, and I wouldn't call it substantive, but I would call it a change that's worth answering the question. So when we brought the project originally in 2023, we worked on conceptual grading plans. And so as we moved on towards fine-tuning the engineering, as they continue to, they discovered that they needed to raise some of the pad elevations in order to make the drainage work as it was approved and shown to. So as a result, some of the pads were raised a little bit to accommodate the drainage to work correctly. That was an immediate flag for city staff, having gone through the approval, knowing what it consists of, and knowing our community. We made sure to contact the applicant right away. We brought up the concerns and what we felt was important, and they worked with us to make sure that there wasn't any impact to Brett Lane. There would have been some elevation changes that we noticed, and they were able to revise the plan so that along Brett Lane, 2 of the homes have no change in the pad elevation. And then as you move your way west, the pad elevations go down like a 1/10 of a foot, but nonetheless, they're lower, not higher than what the Planning Commission approved.
So the drainage is, in what I'm hearing, is set to go towards the west, towards Murrieta Creek, based upon the drainage of what you just described.
Yes, generally the drainage will flow from the high point of Adams over to Washington.
Okay. And then also, because this involves 2 different parcels, or actually 1 parcel for this project here, if the owner had desired, could they have decided to incorporate parcel 1 and just do it, knock the building down and basically have the entire piece that's zoned SF2? Could they have just incorporated a larger project with the same style of homes, where that house sits today, if they so chose?
Yes, they could. I've worked with this property in Esther over the years before Gerson Ranch came to be, and with every proposal from the various people that she's worked with over the years, it's always been consistent where she wanted to keep her home and have the remainder area be developed.
Right. So, but it could have been denser even more so.
Yes.
If that choice had been made, but because for historical values or personal choice, decided to carve out a portion to keep the residents and the trees intact, and essentially develop all the vacant part of that same parcel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chair Vrooman, SF2 is up to 10 units per acre. So I think it's 20 acres. So we're talking 200 units by right. No need to change anything with zoning or the general plan, 200 units. And the general plan analyze that level of development through the last 20 years of general plan updates. It's built into the plan.
So basically, we got 107 plus 1.
Yes.
On that same, instead of the 220. So it's roughly cut by half.
Correct.
Okay. And moving on to the letter by one of the residents there, who's been a longtime resident of the city. So the elevation issues that were brought up, this is a tentative track map. So the forum for those issues can be mitigated at a later time or discussed at a later time with staff. Is that if I'm interpreting correct, and those will be mitigated
Yes.
during the course of the project?
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to some of the traffic issues and concerns. You mentioned stop sign. There will be essentially a stop sign on Adams at the project, which lines up with Knight Drive on Adams. So there will be a set of stop signs. So traffic going north and south will be essentially a 4-way stop, really. Is that correct?
Essentially a 4-way stop, yes. If there isn't the intersection there.
Right, they're coming out on two private roads, but essentially creates a 4-way, but essentially a city traffic controlled 2-way, basically, north and south.
Yes, and that'll be reviewed by the city's traffic engineer, consistent with that traffic impact analysis that we reviewed in 2023 as part of this proposal.
Okay, so that was one of the concerns. And then also on the Washington side, similarly be same type of stop signs going north and south?
Yes, he said it was both Washington and Adams Avenue with the stop sign.
So what's kind of unique on the Washington side is just a little bit south of where that project is, and it's been a, a rise in Washington there at Murrieta. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, and I don't know if maybe traffic engineering. I see that road has recently been resurfaced, but is there any long-term plans maybe to kind of take that elevation out or flatten it? Is it going to come with this project, or is that a kind of a long-term goal of the city to where you get a more direct line of sight right there?
So we have Mr. Rick Elzaga. He's our principal engineer, and he's here to answer the question.
Good evening, Chair Ruman. Yes, the Washington Avenue profile we've looked at, and we recognize that it's an old county road, and it is, to today's standards, it doesn't meet the minimum standards. So right now we're working with the developer to see what can be done to improve that profile. And we're in the middle of what those details are. So the intent is to try and soften that profile to make it standard. We haven't concluded that yet, but there's existing utilities, but we're in that process. And maybe even the developer may be able to add to that, or the designer if they're present today. But I know we've been in recent talks with them and ongoing talks. And the project is also conditioned to look at that.
Yeah, because I can, although Washington doesn't go through all the way, but I can just imagine northbound traffic on Washington there, albeit the traffic isn't as intense as what it used to be years ago. But if there's going to be a stop sign at the base of that slope right there, entering the project, that, you know, if there was any type of stacking or something like that, there's a possibility that a northbound vehicle on Washington would come over the rise, not see a vehicle that might be stopped at the stop sign, and, you know,
Right.
potential for that. So I just bring that up, see if that's something that could be mitigated with this project, or there's a possibility it can be.
And that is the intent. So we go off of the designer's information. We look at the plan and the profile. We look at the design speeds, the stopping distance, those sort of things. And if a stop sign will be introduced at the driveway of the project, what all those things look like. And the project will have to implement those safety requirements as we see them. And our consultant traffic engineer will be looking at those in detail. But that is that process that we're looking at right now.
So basically, if there is a hazard there that, because this project brings it forward and there's a possibility it could cause a traffic concern, then that would have to be a condition that would be fixed with this project if for some reason it caused an unsafe traffic condition for northbound on Washington there.
So that project is currently conditioned via the tentative parcel map and the development plan conditions that were approved in 2023.
Right.
So, and that is the process that we're in. This, today, the track map is
Right.
for the condo purposes. But yes, all those things have been looked at. The project has been conditioned to look at that, as well as the drainage. I know that that's another item of concern. Those items are all identified for the project as a whole.
Yeah, I know those are things that we dealt with before. I'm just being courteous to the person
Sure.
that wrote this in, and I just want to make sure, even though that's really not part of what we have here, they were addressed, and I want to make sure that, hey, staff has taken a look at all these issues. We've already taken a look at them, and you're in the ongoing process to take a look at them. I just wanted to make sure.
Sure. And also just to, as a general response, every project, and so we have boilerplate conditions, we have project-specific conditions, and the conditions as a whole, the intent is to capture all those items, because these are things that we see time and time again as engineers. And so we're well aware of them. And again, that profile is part of the project. Those two parcels are the project, quote unquote, and that vertical crest that you're referring to is right at that corner of the project. And
Right.
in the conditions, when we read them, it all ties together. And yes, so that is part of the design and the approval that will be in consideration of all those things.
So that problem could be solved as a result of this project. There's a possibility that could happen.
That's what we're in the process of trying to do.
Trying to determine that.
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned, Aaron, about the primary entrance on Washington. How is that made a primary entrance versus who decides that, and how is that, it's based upon what the residents decide of their preference of which way they come in. So how does that?
So early on, as we look at, how the site's going to develop,
Right.
and also with the traffic impact analysis that was looked at, the developer has to make a decision on, what is going to be the main entry point and where we're going to make our entry statement, et cetera. And so as they set along with the design and propose it to us, it was always the intent of the applicant to have the main entrance off of Washington Avenue. The traffic study that was analyzed as part of the project identified that Washington Avenue was going to be the main entrance for the project, and it's consistent with what they're proposing. So we'll see the nice marquees that let you know, hey, I'm arriving at Kirsten Ranch, and this is obviously the main entrance because of how it will look.
But ultimately, which side of the project has the higher traffic volume is going to be determined by the residents there.
Yeah, so there are 2 points of access for the project, and there is the design for the main entry. In practice, it may be that some of the residents will go to the closest access point for them for convenience.
I would also add, Chair, in response to the comment, I know you're looking at the letter.
Right.
We can't limit access to one entry point due to fire code and other safety type codes. Police, access as well is important. So we can't just limit access to one access point. So we need to have 2 access points.
No, I totally agree and understand. You'd mentioned, hey, this is the primary, but ultimately that's determined by marquees and what seems to be presented as the main entrance. But in practicality, which side of the project gets used more is really determined upon people that live there decide, hey, which is the easiest for them to get out of the project and get onto whatever main road, or determine it on where they're going.
Yes.
And then the last question I have, I know a little bit about this, the process for speed limit changes and those type of speed surveys and how often they're done. It's been a year and a half. I think we brought this up and talked about it. And again, I'm going back on a resident's concern here, but maybe it's been a year and a half. Has one been done since the last meeting on this, the last year and a half, or is there? It's every so many years. Maybe if you could kind of just educate the audience here on the process, please.
So as far as the study goes, I don't think there's been a current one from December 2023.
Okay.
And I mean, if this project were to stop and then some years go by, depending on development, we'd probably ask for another one. But for now, we'd be relying on the study that was done, presumably in 2023. Okay.
I just to clarify, for enforcement purposes, for law enforcement, in order to enforce speed limit laws, they have to be done every so often in order for law enforcement the ability to write tickets and based upon traffic volumes, average speeds, those type of things like that. So the last one that was done was somewhere back in 2023, a couple of years ago, is what you're saying?
That's my understanding now.
Okay.
So I'm not the traffic engineer, but I know you're correct about surveys every 7 years, I believe is the number. And for the purpose of the study itself, I think those are more overarching studies. It looks at bigger areas. And so it's a different report.
Correct.
So, and I think the surveys can be done independent of those reports, and then we update speed limits or what have you. But the specific answer, I would defer that to our traffic engineer.
Okay.
Commissioner Ruman, so I did follow up with the traffic engineer, and I don't have a date on when we're going to have the update, but it was specific and certain that Adams Avenue will be on the study list. when they do the update.
And after this development, more likely than not, and so it would accommodate that, new residents, those type of things like that?
If it occurred after it was built, then yes.
Okay. Again, this was a concern brought up by a resident that about it's posted 45 miles an hour there, but there's a process and it's so many years and you know, if one was recently done, it might be several years into the future before another one's done, and maybe even after the development happens, because it could conceivably change the speed limit.
That is right, yes.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. So moving on, the next item here is given the opportunity for the applicant, if they would like to add anything based upon what we've discussed so far.
Sure. Good evening, Chairman Vroman, fellow commissioners. My name is Eric Higuchi. I am the applicant for the project. Wanted to convey my sincere thanks and appreciation to yourselves as well as staff for your time and service on this project. I also wanted to convey Esther Gearson's, the underlying landowner who I'm working with, wanted to convey her thanks and appreciation for your time and service as well. I want to clarify a couple items and add some color. I don't have a formal presentation today, but simply put, nothing's changed since 2023. In fact, we had never intended this to be for rent product. It was always intended to be for sale product, and we are just revising or correcting a legal issue that would allow us to have financeable homes on the market. To add some color on the condo map, so these are going to look like standard single-family homes, meaning each single-family house will be standalone, and there will be a separate outdoor living area. In different cities, they do it different ways, where they can actually be a legal lot. The city has opted to do a condominium map. So homeowners will have exclusive use access over their backyards, their driveways, and they will be a shared common area owned by an HOA for the streets, the drainage basin, and the common area. With respect to the historic nature of the house, frankly, the cultural resources report, which is in your packet, is actually a pretty interesting read. This is tied to Esther Gearson's late husband, Dr. Gearson, who, again, I won't bore you with too many details, but he was the county coroner for LA, one of the original county coroners, I believe, and he was a doctor for a lot of Riverside County. He was also a developer. It's an interesting history, and he's a well-known figure in Murrieta's history. So I would argue that the house is certainly historic, along with the large oak trees in front. That may even predate, the importance of those oak trees may even predate Dr. Gearson's ownership of the house. With respect to the future plans for the house, again, they're not a part of this project, but talking with Esther, she is going to use the proceeds from this land sale to renovate the house. In fact, we're actually planning some landscaping for her around the property to enhance her property in the future. We're also connecting sewer and water to her property because she's currently on septic and a well system. In addition, I hate to bore you with these details. I find them interesting. There's actually one cow on there right now named Ebony. They are going to preserve the there's a parcel to the east that's a large parcel that's zoned estate residential. That'll continue to be a pasture for Ebony for as long as the cow's name is Ebony, for as long as she needs it. But again, it's actually not a bad read if you have interest in your city's history. With respect to the common area, this goes back a long time, but the philosophy there is that it's privately owned but publicly accessible. And that's intentional. We were asked by planning, rightly so, to provide some pedestrian connectivity between Adams and Washington to get to the downtown, which is also why our primary entrance is flagged as on Washington, because of the connectivity direct to downtown. Now, we're not in the downtown specific plan, but we wanted to enhance entry on that side because that's what felt like the right thing to do aesthetically. So again, I'm actually kind of excited about this common area because there's elevation on Adams. So even though that's not our primary entrance, you'll be looking down on the common area. You'll be able to walk through it, jog through it. You'll be able to use the facilities, picnic rooms, picnic tables, stuff like that, and walk into the downtown. With respect to the junior ADUs, I appreciate that Aaron's excited about that because I'm excited about those as well. It's a way to, in my opinion, keep younger people in Murrieta, because we're all getting priced out of the region. So instead of little Johnny or Susie graduates from UCLA, instead of going to Idaho or Tennessee or Texas for a job, the idea is that this junior ADU would allow them to have independent living there and be able to, stay with mom and dad and be able to be an active member of the community. Alternatively, when grandma or grandpa becomes a widow or widower, they can come back home with their adult kids, provide child support, but also free up housing stock in the greater community to allow a new family to live there. In addition, it does help with the arena requirements. I guess Aaron and Jarrett will have to verify, but those junior ADUs do count as units pursuant to HCD and HUD. With respect to what could have been, I do appreciate those thoughts, Chairman Vroman. I serve on my own planning commission, and as you're probably aware, there's substantial changes at the state level. This could have been a 150-unit community by right. It also could have been a 300-unit by right affordable community if we chose to use density bonus law. In fact, it probably could have been more with the new state housing laws that were passed this year. But the reason why I'm here tonight is because when I initially proposed this project to Esther, she felt like it was the right thing to do. There were other iterations that Aaron and Jared had seen, which included townhomes, more closer to 125, 150 units. They preserved the house, but didn't preserve the trees or landscaping around the house. This one felt like the best project for the community that worked with her ultimate economic goals of, frankly, retiring and being able to preserve and reinvest into that house. So I'm sure there are other questions. I'm happy to be around to answer them. But I also wanted to introduce Justin Brewer, Division President at Century Communities. He will actually be the builder for the property.
Good evening.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you so much for having me out today. As Eric said, I'm the Division President of the Southern California Division of the Century Communities. This will actually be our second project. We're currently building the townhomes off of Whitewood and Clinton Keith, and those should come to market at the back end of the year. And these projects are very near and dear to my heart. I actually live in the city of Murrieta, about a mile and a half, actually off of Washington, so I understand some of the traffic concerns. But I'll say, Eric's been working on this for a couple years now. We've been engaged for a little over a year and a half, probably, and very excited to bring this to fruition. And so if approved, we'll be the ones that are actually constructing the site. And I can say as somebody that lives down the street from here, I'm glad to not have 150 units. It's nice to, there's some apartments and things like that have come up. And so any questions of myself as Century, and appreciate the time here today.
I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
Do you have any questions of?
No, thank you both for coming. I appreciate the clarity on some of the topics that have come up. Let's see, this kind of reminds me, we did a project, or we approved a project years ago, and they kind of called it low maintenance living. And this kind of reminds me of that, where it's they are these individual single family homes, which I'm super happy to see on this side of town. Obviously, we've already had our fair share of apartments coming in and being approved. So I do like to see this being built on this property, given, again, like you guys said, what could have been. But as far as questions, we're here to talk about the fact that you guys are changing this to a tract map, a 107 unit tract map, a for sale, by owner tract map. And I think that's great. That's what we want. Like someone said that it wasn't ever your intention to have this as rental properties. So, this is just the process of doing that. And, I understand it's a long process. So I appreciate your guys' consideration for the oak trees and the historical value of that area. I feel like you guys are putting your best foot forward to be a good neighbor. And actually, speaking of that, there is one concern or a request, I should say, along, I think it's Brett Lane. Do you guys have the intention, or is it in the conditions or part of your plans to build a 6-foot block wall? Do you know if there is or not?
Yeah, correct. There is a 6-foot block wall planned along our property line on Brett Lane. So we are going through, we went into that process knowing full well of the sensitivity in Brett Lane. We're building that wall on our property line. In addition, we are explicitly not using Brett Lane for construction access to build that block wall. So in fact, they're doing something called ABC slot cutting. We
I know what that is.
Yeah, it's painful because there's also shoring involved. So
Yeah.
it is relatively costly.
Yeah.
In addition, some other project history here was Brett Lane was actually contemplated as a city road, a public road. In fact, there's a dedication to the southeast along Washington Avenue, I believe, an offer of dedication. Maybe it hasn't been dedicated. But there was discussions early on continuing that dedication on Brett Lane and improving Brett Lane as an obligation for our project to improve Brett Lane as a public road. The residents, I think rightly so, opted not to. They wanted to keep Brett Lane private. So in fact, their lot lines go all the way up to our lot line. And that will continue to be, and that was an effort with Rick and public engineering and planning to make that happen. So those lots will continue. Those homes, as well as Brett Lane, will continue to be privately owned and maintained by those residents.
Okay, good. Well, and I appreciate that sensitivity to that. I've grown up here my whole life on the west side, over kind of in this area actually, and you know, rightfully so. You guys buy this property and have the right to develop it in the zoning it is, but it's a huge change for the residents of this area, right? And so you guys can understand and appreciate and respect that, you know, with this change, you know, to be a good neighbor as best as you can and, you know, meet some of that criteria is important. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I'm certainly a guest in the city. Justin happens to not be, but we do owe a debt to the stakeholders to hear him out and create a project that's not just economically viable, that is important, but also doesn't limits impact.
Well, in Murrieta, it's an important thing to us, and I've been on this planning commission for I think 6 or 7 years, and it's very important that when we like developers that are invested into the city. Justin lives here; that's pretty cool, and you know that you guys aren't maximizing your pocketbook with the biggest building and the ugliest building that you can. I mean, these buildings are beautiful. I'm happy to see it. So if we can make sure that that's a 6-foot wall and, for privacy issues and, noise and things like that, I think that would be important. And that's 6 foot from the dirt going up, not counting the footing, but.
Correct. The cross-section, 6-foot wall. Then there's I think there's an existing asphalt berm along Brett Lane and then Brett Lane. So,
okay.
Yeah,
okay. And, and again, like you said, and I'm sure the studies show that the stormwater discharge is retained on site and it's not going to damage Brett Lane. You could appreciate that if these folks are out of pocket to improve that. That could be a costly thing if all this drainage is coming off. I know it's not, but I'm just wanting to clarify that.
Well, with respect to that, I think the most important thing to understand here is the developer carries all the liability. So even if there is damage, that is our fault, and we'll have to repair that, and we'll be responsible for that.
You mean during construction?
Even post-construction.
Okay, post-construction, yeah.
There's substantial liability that we carry. In fact, we indemnify everybody, including the city, on any damages. So certainly any damage done to Brett Lane, that is our responsibility, will be on us. With respect to Brett Lane, I know there's some issues with the concerns with the drainage there, but it is a street, and it was intended to be a public street, and public streets convey water. I will say, at least in this case, fairly or unfairly, that from Adams down Brett Lane, it does crash into or drain back into Esther's property. So that again will remain a field. It's not crashing into a new block wall. It'll drain into her property, which is currently an open field.
Pretty much as it is right now.
Exactly, as is right now. So if there's concerns about developability of that large parcel there, that's because of the option to not have Brett Lane be a public road. That's frankly Esther's problem now, and that will be a significant cost if she ever chose to develop that property, which probably isn't going to happen for quite a long time.
Right, but Brett Lane does not go through to Washington, correct? It kind of dead ends right there.
It dead ends there, but there's a little. It looks like you're right. It does not go through Washington.
Okay, yeah, and I don't see how building a block wall along the property line is going to increase any type of water flow. It's if any, it's not like you guys are building a big parking lot that's going to shed water into Brett Lane. So you're pretty much just drawing a line in it, and it's not gonna increase water flow at all.
We're below. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I had. Washington is your guys' the main exit. I think that's as far as everything else, it's already been approved and everything's already done. So
frankly, we're agnostic. If you want to put monumentation on Adams, that's fine as well. But it just feels aesthetically it's better on Washington. The Tour, oh boy, I forgot. The Tour de Murrieta goes on Washington. So I think we even have a water station planned out there to accommodate that. But,
Okay, good.
back a long time ago, we kind of envisioned this as kind of a meet-up point for those cyclists.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
That was 3 years ago, so I'm not sure if that route's changed.
I don't know, actually. It changed this year because that bridge problem on Hayes Street. But anyways, well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Product looks nice, and thank you for clarifying everything. And
Great.
yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Commissioner Sena.
You know, in 2023, it was a lot different than now with all the high density that has come in. And, you know, so I do appreciate you guys deciding to only put 107 units in there and they're single family. That's a big change. Kind of with the flow of how the city's gone. You know, you live here, and that's wonderful also. And you know, there's some concerns I do have, and they're not related to this per se, in the sense of this is going to pass because the state dictates and you own it, and that's all it is. But impact on school, you know, the elementary school there, the middle school, the high school. You got those apartment complexes on Washington that's going to overflow there. So there's going to be an impact there. The other end of that is, it was said earlier that those roads were designed for an extra 300 cars, but then it was said by somebody else that they're old county roads. I'm pretty sure they didn't account for that amount of traffic when they developed them at first. And I'm just curious, you live here, and I know you're not going to talk poorly of your project, obviously, but you live in the Washington area. So you're going to see that impact just like the rest of us, because I live in West Murrieta also. So I think you could appreciate the hesitance that probably a lot of people in the audience and a lot of people watching this, if there is anybody watching it, is going to have on this project, even though it's going to pass, you know, because you do meet all the requirements. It's going to impact the schools heavily. It's going to impact the traffic. There's no way those streets are made for, you know, 500 cars to be going down at peak hours, 400 cars. And now, you know, the ADUs are interesting because they're going to have family members there. You're going to have kids there. People are going to grow up there. So that's even more traffic going down that way, more kids in school. So it's going to impact. I don't know if you have young kids or not, but I do.
I got a 4-year-old.
Yeah, so you're getting ready for kindergarten, first grade, right? So, you know, you're going to have, where do those kids go? And I know recently a project was kind of shot down to have a new school put in that area, and the residents didn't want that either, and that kind of got passed by. So my curiosity, I guess, and it's not this forum, is like what's going to happen in that aspect. But I am happy to see it's not another apartment, you know, I'm not going to say ugly apartment complex, but an apartment complex, and they look nice. By any chance, do you know what the price range are going to be for this house? Because you did talk about little UCLA, Becky Sue, or whatever you said, is going to be able to afford these or come home to their parents' house. And
Oh, I don't think Becky Sue has any chance of affording a house in California.
Fair
But,
enough.
You know, like I'll be the jerk that says it. I think it's around $600,000. You know, I know a lot of people don't like to commit to that, but in this current market environment, it's probably that's probably the price.
about
which-
600,000. And do you know what the square footage is for the houses?
I think these range from 1850 to 2250.
1,800.
1800. Yeah, including the ADU.
Including the ADU?
Yeah, including the ADU.
Okay. And they're attached to the house?
So they're going to effectively look like a master bedroom down.
Okay.
So they'll either be optioned used as a man cave or a bonus room or a craft room, or, you know, hopefully they could also be used as a unit in my ideal world, it would be an older person, you know, that's now able to help provide childcare, but also free up housing stock.
Like
I think
a
that's what the
generational
intention
kind of
was.
home.
Yeah, originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are they outfitted with like utilities and everything?
Yeah, so they're required to have a bedroom plus access to a bathroom. They will, in this case, they will have their own bathroom, and they have to have a little area for cooking. They don't necessarily have to have a stove, but an area for a microwave or a stove, and they have to have a sink.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah. With respect to your other issues, it's just for me to opine. You know, it's actually nice to have growth because other cities in California have declining enrollment in schools, and it's indicative of a greater problem and, frankly, budgetary issues. So, you know, I sympathize, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's good on one hand, and then it opens up a whole nother can of we're overcrowded. We're getting there, like when everything maxes out. But anyways, but anyways, I really appreciate you all showing up today, and thank you for presenting.
I really have one question for you is, I recall, again, back in December 2023, when the block wall was initially discussed, and I want to say that there was some discussion, or you were going to work with staff with maybe landscaping or something, you know, to kind of help cover the block wall. And I don't know if whatever became of that, or the residents not wanted, or what was the ultimate decision on that?
Yeah, this was a while ago, and we had some discussions with the residents. I forget the name of the bagel shop in Old Town, but if we were to landscape that and make that an HOA responsibility, that would require our trucks, well, the HOA trucks, to go on to Brett Lane, and that's probably the worst case scenario with backup trucks backing up onto Adams. There's certainly, if they want to provide their own landscaping along the Brett Lane side of the wall, that's their prerogative, that's their property. But I don't think it's a good idea to provide our HOA maintained landscaping back there.
Okay, so I didn't know what the final decision was. And the only other question I have might be for staff, and this is just kind of again, with the Brett Lane, and it has to do with a letter that was submitted and access onto their property or on that private road. Do the property owners have the option, if they so chose, to put a gate up there and make it a private gated street? Do they have that option? If they, I don't know the answer to that, so I'm just wondering if that is a possibility if they wanted to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, for owners of a private road, in order for them to block a gate, I think they have to work with the local jurisdiction and their fire department.
Right.
We would have to have some sort of automated way to open that gate. It can be very challenging, the type of gate, whether it's a swing gate or something that pulls back. So a lot goes into that. We've had those types of requests to shut down certain areas. Not all of them can be supported because of the limits of the engineering exercise to put in a gate. But it is possible, but it's a very difficult and expensive feat to accomplish.
Okay, that's what I wanted to say. What comes to mind is Street Family Lane, which is right off Adams, north of Calmia, right there with a similar type of, several home developments in there and a gate, and of course fire access, to that. But so the possibility does exist if they ever wanted to explore that, they'd have to work with city staff.
Yes, they would. And we would want to keep our pedestrian access connecting downtown, but it is a possibility.
Okay. I just throw that out there. Okay, thank you. That's, you have any?
Through the chair, we're here and available for any questions. Also, I think pursuant to your municipal code, I'd like to reserve the right to make a rebuttal in the event there's any questions.
Yes, we're going to take public testimony, and then if there's any follow-up based upon that, we'll have you come back up to the podium. Okay, with that, we'll move on to public testimony. The time is now 7:03 p.m. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments, starting with proponents, then opponents, and then those neutral in that order?
So we have Wendy Sargis in opposition, and she will be speaking or taking Linda Everson's time as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sargis. If you would come on forward to the podium.
I have a PowerPoint, so
okay.
Just waiting.
Are you trying to, I think, bottom right, next couple over, up, right there. Yep.
There you go.
Oops.
You back up one?
Okay, good evening. My name is Wendy Sargis, and I live on Brett Lane, which is one of the 4 properties adjacent to this development. I'm a resident for nearly 35 years. We have been involved with this project since it began. We have written numerous letters and met with many city officials and departments. There are still, to date, a few items that have been discussed and even proposed, but not in writing or resolved. As Brett Lane homeowners, we are requesting for these items to be put into writing and resolved. Just a quick history and a clarification on why Brett Lane will not be improved as a public road. because Brett Lane is the property of the homeowners that spans to the property line of Gearson Ranch Development, and it is not city property, and no homeowner would want to give up their land. We own this land and have paid taxes on it. It is our front yard. Brett Lane consists of 4 rural estate homes that were built in the 1970s and 80s on 1+ acre lots. So to clarify, we own this land, the dirt road. Nobody wants to give up their land. Our first request regarding exterior block wall placement and height from Brett Lane property elevation. The last Planning Commissioners meeting on December 13, 2023, it was stated that the 6-foot height wall is proposed along the entire Brett Lane project frontage. This 6-foot block wall needs to be from the Brett Lane elevation, as this has not been shown on any of the documents or plans, such as the most current tentative track map number 39271 dated February 14, 2025. This scale written on the map does not equal 6 feet from the grade of Brett Lane side. However, the noticeable change that was made on the most current track map was the block wall moved to the property line. The Brett Lane homeowners are still requesting the setback as shown originally on the approved City of Murrieta Planning Department conceptual grading plan map dated December 13th of 2023. Request number 2. The Gearson Ranch Development block wall will have an impact by generating more storm water runoff, and this would impact off-site properties such as Brett Lane. The solid block wall, which currently we have a chain link fence that divides the 2 properties. So there's going to be a solid block wall that will change the direction of the water significantly and cause erosion to our land, as well as flooding in the lower lining areas, which would be the last property on Brett Lane. Noting that Brett Lane has been properly maintained with no previous erosions or flooding issues to date. The prevailing wind for this area is from the east to west. Otherwise, if the wind is blowing in the opposite direction, it would be considered a Santa Ana. And generally, there is no rain with the Santa Ana. With the normal and natural direction of the wind coming from the east to the west and having a solid block wall placed at the property line would allow for more rainfall to deflect and shed down along Brett Lane Road. Once again, we are requesting to have the wall set back as it was originally proposed with hardscape such as rocks to help eliminate the erosion. And this wall, something that came up later, is if it gets tagged or graffiti, how is this project going to take care of that without having a setback? They're going to want to enter Brett Lane. So to keep that in mind. The last request, unfortunately, does have to do with making the request again. Since the last meeting, when it was already stated to not utilize or access our properties for this development, this request just played on deaf ears. We have experienced multiple incidents of trespassing and unauthorized usage of our properties. Brett Lane is clearly marked at the entrance, private road, residents only, but has had many incidents occur with trespassing, even by a representative of Century Community Builders. The City of Murrieta is faced with developments that are being put up against other developments that are not zoned the same and have the completely different purposes. I would like to point out that our land is being used as it always has been, stayed consistent, ongoing, and intended for such as farmland to produce food and have livestock that will make noises, as tractors are used as well as other farm equipment, even on Saturdays and Sundays. The lifestyles are going to be much different than a condo owner. There are 3 major issues that I would like the commissioners to ask questions about. There have been changes by eliminating the setbacks from what was already approved at the December 13th, 2023 plans. The block wall should be the height that it was also approved on the December 13th, 2023 meeting, which is 6 foot from the Brett Lane elevation. And finally, the drainage and erosion that will happen, and to minimize this by having a setback on the block wall with rock to prevent erosion. We just asked that's it. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, do we have any other speakers?
Carrie Kretzner.
Hi.
Aye.
Thank you. My name is Carrie Kretzner. I'm also a resident on Brett Lane, third house down. So I just really wanted to reiterate some of the things that Wendy has mentioned. We all have the same concerns. The number one, the setback. Not only the setback with the property line that we've discussed, but Eric mentioned meeting at the Crafted Scone back in the summer of 2023. We talked about, setting it back even further, and you seem to say that would be not a problem. So, I mean, that doesn't even seem like that's under consideration here. You had mentioned something about landscaping, but it was more than a conversation about landscaping. It was about giving us a little bit of extra space because that block wall is going to be right in our faces. So, the height of the wall, it does seem on these new plans that it looks like it's very low by the time it gets down to my house. I'm the third house, so it's a little questionable if it really is 6 feet all the way down and how that's going to really work out. And then the erosion issue, I mean, we say it's not going to be a big deal, but you really don't know until this happens. I'm glad to hear that there's some, the builder takes liability for that because it really can be quite a big issue with a wall that hasn't been there. Like Wendy mentioned, we have a chain link fence. So I think it's really just the unknowns. And then, lastly, the airspace issue. I talked with Aaron about what it is, and you guys have explained during this meeting, but the letter that was sent to us didn't say anything about airspace. I feel like everything's just kind of vague, and people who are not builders don't know what these changes are. And then to find out it's about airspace, but that was never in the letter. And then you hear airspace and you think, well, can you build these buildings taller? What happens if these plans kind of change? What are we opening ourselves up for by just saying yes to this? Like, what else could be going on? I mean, I think that's just us as residents here are kind of worried, skeptical. So just want to make sure that we're covering all our bases and asking the right questions because the literature that comes to us doesn't, again, make sense to people who aren't builders. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, do we have any other persons wishing to speak?
Yes, we have Mike Rennie.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mike Rennie. I am the resident right next door, 25170 Washington Avenue. I've lived there 35 years, and I appreciate that this is not as high as density as it could have been. We've met with Eric a few times. It's nice that there's a local man that's going to start the building projects. I'm happy to hear that. But we've got a little bit of a bait and a switch here. This started as a single-family home, which is what should be commensurate to the historical nature of Old Town to Murrieta. This is all we have left. The small 1 acre homes that are still there are 2 acre homes. Everything else in Murrieta is changing. We need to preserve this area. And that's my big concern. I would like to see these remain. I don't want condos. Condos are not what we need. Mr. LaPaglia, you live in Old Town. I know where you are. And I think your family lived in Old Town. I think I knew your uncle or your father.
I live on the west side.
You do, okay. We're all residents there. Frankly, Washington Avenue is a death trap. I live there. I'm there all the time. That hill right in front of, I have a vineyard there on that property. That hill, people air off that hill all the time. So what's going to happen when you have cars parking all along Washington Avenue, which I think there should be no parking on Washington. I think that's a very frightening thing. People come over that hill, they get air, and then there's a lady in the middle of the night trying to cross because they're parking on both sides, walking into the development with a child. And that lady's going to get killed. And I've had Aaron with me. Aaron knows that everybody that comes out of Manista Lane cannot pull out because they can't see oncoming traffic. So they have to go in the other lane. This is an old road. This is a very dangerous situation. Secondly, I want to mention that Esther's home, I knew Doc Gerson many years ago before he died, and he was an interesting guy for sure. But that 100-year-old oak tree in that home is historical, and it should be made historical. It should never be torn down. That is part of our history. It's the 1860s, along with the Buchanan Ranch across the street. They're very historical. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that the 400 cars that will come out of there onto Washington, it is a death trap, and the city is exposing itself to some major issues if people are killed on that road. And the reason, I'm not trying to be over dramatic, but I live on that road. If you do not do something to really lower that road and change that road, someone will be killed. And I don't think we should allow parking on Washington Avenue. I think it's a very dangerous thing. Perhaps one side, but certainly not both. And I hope that some clarity can be given here, because I do believe it should be single-family homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, any other speakers, please?
Seeing none.
Okay, with that, I'll give the applicant a chance for a rebuttal.
Yeah, less of a rebuttal, but I first want to commend the residents of Brett Lane and Washington Avenue for, frankly, being some of the more cordial and most professional engaged residents I typically deal with. So that's something to be proud of, frankly, in Murrieta, even though there are concerns with the project. With respect to the parking on either Adams or Washington, I do recall, Aaron, I believe we committed to no parking signs, certainly on Adams, and maybe even red curb there to the extent feasible, because I know there are issues with street parking. I don't know that there are issues with street parking currently in front of it, but we've committed to no parking on Adams, and I think we're happy to do the same on Washington Avenue. So certainly no street parking on Washington Avenue in front of our project. With respect to the wall along Brett Lane, I apologize if the plans are unclear, but it is going to be a 6-foot wall, certainly. And with respect to the easement or the setback from the property line, I do apologize. Something may have been lost in translation when we had to accommodate and conform to the old conceptual grading plan. But we'll definitely take a hard look at that to allow more of a setback there, to allow more planting and more in alignment with what we had talked about 3 years ago. And again, I sympathize with the complexity of real estate. I know this sounds like airspace. This sounds definitely different. I live in this world and everything's complicated. I'm an expert in real estate. I'm also an expert in archaeology and cultural resources and water quality and biology now, or at least I know enough. But I do believe that this project and approval of this project does lock in this as a 2-story, whether it's legally single family or condos, it does lock into what looks like a single family community. And just to point out the frontages, this will actually have less driveways than a typical single family community, and that was intentional. Just for quick math, you have two houses for every driveway in this project. So the street frontage was important to us. Happy to follow up and answer any questions or address any concerns you may have.
Wondered, don't go away for a second. I just want to make sure that we addressed Ms. Sargis's 3 questions there. Maybe that it would be helpful for you to, for all of us, to put that slide back up and just make sure that you covered all 3 of those.
It was the rock wall, the wall kind of starting at the elevation of Brett Lane, because Brett Lane seems to be a little bit higher elevation than your guys' property. Currently it looks like the water probably sheds off Brett Lane across the chain link fence into your property.
So presently, if you go out there, there is an asphalt berm.
Yeah.
I haven't measured it myself. I think it's about 6 inches. It is older. I'd also state that a chain link fence isn't the appropriate drainage facility because chain link fences during rain events get clogged up substantially with debris.
I agree.
With respect to rain sheeting off a block wall, I'm not a civil engineer or hydrologist, but that's pretty difficult to quantify. Rainwater hitting a solid wall and quantifying that amount of water off that block wall. So that would be infeasible for us to address.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were the other questions?
If you could flip to the screen that had the three.
No, but I think on that note, I think they were requesting like some type of like gravel or something at the toe.
Yeah,
of the,
that's certainly something we did talk about. And
and I appreciate that. It's going to be tough to manage. It's going to be, I'm in the grading and rock world, and we do a lot of this, and gravel with heavy enough rain will wash away. And I don't necessarily think that's like, anyone's fault. It's just, you can't put like a riprap channel down there with 24-inch rock. So, I don't know, it's going to be a little bit of give and take. I mean, I sympathize for the homeowners, but you guys did choose to keep that as a private road. So it will be privately maintained by you. So it's just tough to expect them to do so much and like maybe put in the infrastructure and then to maintain that infrastructure. It's going to have to be a little bit of give and take. I don't really know how it changed or what changed with the offset. That's something that if plans are approved and the city approved the plans and everything's done, then like obviously you guys legally can't change those plans. That's just something that maybe was some type of error, something's being misread, but whatever the offset or on your property line that was discussed should remain. Right. But I don't know. I don't really have a point here. I guess my point is just that it's going to be a balance between, there might be a little bit more maintenance done by the homeowners that chose to keep that road private. And there's only so much that you guys can do as developers to prevent erosion.
Generally speaking, erosion prevention is good maintenance. And if it's a private road and there's no city maintenance, it is on the homeowners.
Yeah.
If you could flip to that screen, I would appreciate. I just want to make sure while you're still up here that those three questions have been addressed. There we go.
Yeah, certainly a 6-foot block wall will be along Brett Lane. In fact, I think that might be a city code requirement, if I'm not mistaken.
But the big thing there is, the elevation of topography to show that like it starts at Brett Lane. Brett Lane's not a foot higher than where the wall starts. So I don't see your guys' grading plan, but does the grading plan come flush with Brett Lane or no? Is it below Brett Lane?
It's below. Yeah.
It is below Brett Lane. Okay, so I think their point, if I'm not mistaken, they can nod in the back, but I think their point is that they want a 6-foot block wall from the elevation of Brett Lane.
No, certainly. It's a 6-foot block wall on Brett Lane.
On Brett Lane. Okay.
On Brett Lane. There's a condition on, especially towards Adams, where we'll have a 2-to-1 slope.
Yep.
And another block wall.
Okay.
To hold back that slope, because there is significant elevation differential between closer to Adams versus down on Washington.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
it'll look like a 6-foot block wall all along Brett Lane.
Okay. Well, that's good. So that's item number 1. So if you want to go down to 2.
Yeah. The additional drainage and erosion happen on Brett Lane. Again, I don't want to be contentious, but that one would be difficult and maybe infeasible for us to calculate based upon sheeting off of a vertical wall. In addition, those as I mentioned before, Brett Lane is intended to convey stormwater, as all streets are, and it ultimately ends up back on Esther's property. And you have a situation where it's cross-lot drainage across private property, and that's just what we have to live with on Esther's property.
Yeah, no, I agree. Putting a block wall there, it's going to retain the water instead of it bleeding off, technically, illegally onto Esther's property now. Well, but that's how it's always been since the beginning of time. So this wall is now going to just continue the water down Brett Lane, and it's just going to be
correct. And frankly, more I failed to make this point. The installation of an engineered block wall will also prevent the ultimate erosion of Brett Lane, at least on Esther's side, because currently, if it's left in its current condition, maybe in a long time, the road could fall into Esther's property. With this block wall and engineered slope, it'll be subject to constant maintenance through the HOA as well as professionally designed.
It'll never erode down to the footing, is what you're saying. Like it will kind of keep its integrity along Brett Lane.
Right.
So maybe if you guys start off by just putting a little bit of gravel down on that toe just to kind of prevent it, but then it's that's kind of like good faith on you, and then it's up to the homeowners to maintain that when we have a 100-year storm and it washes all that 3/4 gravel away.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah.
For private road.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
For that wall, someone brought up about like graffiti and all that. Will the HOA manage if that wall on their side is damaged?
That is ultimately the HOA's responsibility.
Okay, so who would the residents would contact? So like say Brett Lane residents, they would contact the HOA of that community in order to rectify it if they don't know?
I'd imagine that the official process would probably be a notice to the city. If there's no official relationship between the Brett Lane residents and the HOA, the city would notify the HOA, and they would have to work out some sort of deal, private party agreement to go into Brett Lane and repair that or cover up that graffiti.
Okay.
But again, that is totally subject to the discretion of the ownership of the owners in Brett Lane, because it is their property.
Can the city comment on that? Like maintenance?
I think this is highly speculative, and we're getting into some scope creep here.
I agree.
We're just looking at a map. That's all we're looking at.
I'm wondering if we close the public hearing, if we're done with that portion, if we have some follow-up after that as a matter of protocol, would that be the better way of addressing it?
I also feel like
we're talking to the applicant. If we have questions for the applicant, we walk through those questions with the applicant, then we can move on to the commission's deliberation.
Do you have any other questions of the applicant at this point in time?
No, I'm just, I think we're just addressing the concerns of the residents to the applicant is how I feel. But if I have no direct questions for the applicant now.
Any clarification, Mr. DeSena? Do you have any more?
I mean, I attempted to, but it was kind of shut down, so I'll keep quiet.
No. Go. If you have another question, I just
no, please. Ask your question, please.
No, I think the question is that people came from the public to ask questions, and it was to address it with you as far as, what's done there, so that they can get a better understanding for the questions they asked. I think the last question I have that really was brought up, two was like, there was evidently a discussion that took place where there was a setback that was talked about. If that, so I, kind of want to ask, was that conversation talked about where there would be a setback? And if there was, what actually changed? That's question one. Question two is, if I take a walk down Brett Lane, once you put your wall in, I'm not 6 foot, will it always be above my head?
Yes. With respect to the question on the 6-foot wall, yes. As long as you're 90 degrees parallel to the wall. With respect to the question on a setback, yes, that was discussed. That's something that I have to apologize for. We'll take a look at that. But to Commissioner LaPaglia's point, that may create more issues for the residents than we had foreseen due to his expertise. But that's something we're happy to look at in terms of some sort of, maybe not even a gravel area, maybe a dirt area for planting. I know that's something we kind of talked about.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
And I do not have any questions of the applicant, so.
Thank you, Chairman Borman. Thank you, Commissioners.
At this point in time, we do not have any other speakers. We already closed that. We already got that. So this closes our public hearing at 7:29. And so now is the time if we have discussion or if you have any clarifying questions or anything that staff you'd like to add at this point in time.
If I may, Commissioner Ruman, in response to the public comments made regarding the wall and regarding the track map that we have today. The residents are correct on the section details. It leaves you unclear as you're looking at those as to whether or not the block wall is supposed to be 6 feet. In my presentation this evening, we emphasized how the project is approved. On our approved plans, we showed the section detail that Wendy provided to us this evening, showing a 6-foot block wall. The tentative track map doesn't have that clarity, so it is supposed to be a 6-foot block wall. It is in your purview to maybe condition them to have a 6-foot wall along Brett Lane. But that is what is intended, that's what's approved. It's just that the track map section details don't provide that specific clarity. And in terms of the setback of the wall, when we went to hearing, the project is approved to have a perimeter block wall. Brett Lane, we were in discussions and consultations with them all the way up to the hearing. That section detail was developed in working with the residents and Eric to come up with a visual of what it was going to look like. At that time, going to the hearing, there were discussions with Eric and the residents about some potential scenarios for the interface between Brett Lane and the new project. They were going to have discussions about how they might want that to turn out. Ultimately, it was left that they would leave a little bit of room on the project side to allow for maintenance of the wall. This would then allow them to maintain the wall on their side of the property without trespassing on Brett Lane. And we've heard a lot from the residents about the importance of Brett Lane and why it's a private street, and you know how there shouldn't be people trespassing on it.
Okay, so is there, you mentioned there could be a condition of approval added to make sure it's 6 foot based on the perspective of the people on Brett Lane?
Yes, it would be simply clarifying what was already approved, but certainty is always better.
Okay, so that could be done by us tonight.
Correct.
And then you mentioned the buffer area on the Brett Lane side to access for maintenance of the wall, those type of things like that without impacting Brett Lane. That could be done as well through another.
That would be done through an easement, actually, Chairman. So the property owner will have to, the property owners of that area would have to grant the HOA an easement for them to go over there and do maintenance on that. That would have to be a future discussion between those parties.
And there hasn't been any discussion of that thus far?
I'm not aware of any discussion so far, but they do have a list of conditions of approval that they have to implement.
Chair, if I may, what kind of maintenance would be required on a block wall that would need an easement or staff?
Yeah, you know, typically, sometimes you get a Yahoo that does graffiti. That's unfortunate. That's something that should be taken care of pretty quickly by an HOA. You'll notice that over a 15, 20-year period, sometimes the block wall splits a little bit just because of the earth moving around a little bit, but rarely do you have that much maintenance. If it's a stucco wall, you might need to repaint that every few years.
Okay, so we're talking like once every couple of years that someone might need to access Brett Lane to do some type of maintenance.
Typically, yeah, it's around the time frame.
Okay. There's 4 owners on that road. Like, do you think that we could just get permission from them to access to do this type of maintenance? I mean, it's to aesthetically improve the look of the wall.
Well, yeah, to clarify, the city doesn't do the maintenance.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
it's done privately.
So it would be between the developer and the residents to talk this through and do it outside this room.
Yeah, because I doubt they're going to get a 10-foot offset to drive a vehicle in between the block wall and the private property. So, no, that's tough.
That might also be a good way to have the future residents and the Brett Lane residents have an interaction and get to know each other and moving forward in the future.
Yeah, I agree. What about the parking? That was the gentleman that came up here and spoke. You know, they know it best. they live in that area. They've lived in that area for a long time. Is there any concerns on slowing down traffic on Washington?
I don't believe we have parking on either Adams or Washington. All of the site is parked within the interior, and we have a number of guest spaces. I think we had a total of, 69 guest spaces for the public. So we don't see the need or demand to park on the street, but none is being planned for this project. As alluded earlier, Adams Avenue has always had a parking restriction, and this project will not add parking to Adams Avenue. We will continue with no parking signs along that road.
Okay. Just to kind of circle back to the fact that, we are here to approve this map, right? This track map. Are we allowed to speak about some of these concerns that were brought up tonight and try to, rectify some of them?
I did kind of I appreciate that, Commissioner. I kind of wanted to clarify the development plan is approved and has all the conditions, and you've already heard this project, right? So
I wasn't personally here, but yeah.
Your commission.
Yeah.
So I was here and the chair was here. So we've hashed through these issues and the conditions are there. We talked about the traffic. We talked about the streets. That's all done. Ship has sailed. To clarify for the residents, the zone is still the same. They can't build a 10-story building. The zone is what the zone is. They can just build a 2-story building, like what they're proposing within the height limit of the zone. There's a development bubble essentially that they can build. The airspace is just that they're building a condo rather than a single-family home where people own the land underneath, right? So
right, which is all a good thing.
That's it. That's all that's really in front of you. Development plan is entitled. They could go start building the development plan tomorrow if they wanted to. It's already done. Ship has sailed.
So, should we, I feel like there's been some good points brought up though, as far as the speed down Washington and putting simple things like no parking signs and things like that. Should we just not even go down that road?
We went through this a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
The city traffic engineer was here that night. We talked about it. The Brett Lane residents mentioned that they asked for no parking on Adams. The signs are there. I believe Wendy brought pictures of the no parking signs on Adams, and we talked about it. So we've been down that road.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think the only option of what you just mentioned is just to clarify, maybe in our motion, is to add, to ensure that the block wall is 6 feet from the perspective of the Brett Lane side.
That is correct. All we would be doing was clarifying what was already approved, but clarification is better.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve with the clarification of that the wall is the block wall as discussed is 6 foot, as per the perspective of the Brett Lane side.
Can you move it to the recommendation slide? Please.
And did you want to, I know I added the add-on condition on there, but we actually have the recommendation if you wanted to.
If it pleases the chair, I can read that for you.
Please.
So the recommendation is to consider and approve the exemption for projects consistent with the community plan or zoning pursuant to the guidelines for the implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15183 of Title 14, Division 6, Chapter 3 of the California Code of Regulations, and the Public Resources Code, Section 21083.3. And number 2, adopt a resolution entitled A Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Murrieta approving a tentative tract map for the subdivision of 15.81 gross acres for 107 residential units to be developed with 107 detached single-family homes and related improvements for circulation infrastructure and common recreation area located at 25190 Washington Avenue, based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and is found in Attachment 1 with the motion for the 6-foot wall along Brett Lane as clarified by the chair prior to in his motion.
Okay, with that, go ahead and register our votes.
Motion carries unanimously, 3-0.
Okay, that concludes this item. give a little bit of time for change out of staff for the next item.
Yeah. And actually, Jared, should I go ahead and address the fact that I own some property within 500 feet of the next item, Chair? So I will need to recuse myself from the next public hearing item.
Do you want me to start the next item, or is that?
Announce it. Okay, we'll announce it first.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and announce it. So the next item is a consideration of a development agreement for digital billboards at locations approved by the relocation agreement. Are there any members of the Planning Commission that wishes to abstain or recuse themselves from this item?
That's my cue. Yeah, I need to recuse myself from this item as we own property. I own property within 500 feet of one of these proposed billboards. So.
Can I just clarify that? Is it, I guess, question to the city attorney, is it okay for the commissioner to hear the presentation and recuse himself from the consideration of one of the three? Or is it just better for him to recuse himself from the entire item, or does he have an option there?
It's best to recuse from the entire item, especially because they're all being voted on together.
Okay. Just wanted to clear that for you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Okay, with that leaves us to two commissioners. Is that going to pose us a problem?
No, Chairman, I did have a moment with City Attorney before the hearing. The rules are for the Planning Commission Rules of Order, which is one of your Bibles here.
Right.
Good night, Mr. LaPaga. As long as you start the hearing with a quorum, which you did, you sat with 3, and as long as we can continue the item with at least 2 present, but there's a little pressure. You two would have to concur. But again, I'm not packing the witnesses here. It's just that we followed the guidelines of your PC Rules of Order, and it's all spelled out in there. And so we followed that tonight. And,
right. Before you got started with your staff report, I just wanted to clarify that
Yeah.
for any members of the audience that are still here or watching online, just so we make that clear.
Appreciate that, Chair. Yeah, so we still have a quorum. We've got 2 commissioners, so we can hear the item.
Okay, with that, I will turn it over to staff.
All right. Well, I'm Jarrett Ramaya, Deputy Director with the Development Services, here tonight to present to you the consideration of a development agreement for digital billboards at locations approved by a previously done relocation agreement. Scott Agajanian is joining me tonight. He's the Economic Development Director, very much someone who brings a lot of business to our town and make sure they're successful. I also wanted to thank Farah and my director, David. They put a lot of work into this, into the background. I just came up a little bit, picking up some pieces here, but let me walk you through this tonight here. All right, so back in late 2022, the city of Lamar entered into a relocation agreement. This would provide Lamar with rights to relocate and reconstruct, because they have a number of facilities in our jurisdiction. And pursuant to the terms of this agreement, we're here tonight to talk about 3 specific signs that would be converted from paper to the bright sky. So you're going from static, which is your old school, to the new billboard, which is your like LED, your larger type of facilities. And we just want to talk about the development agreement real quick. That was in the packet that we handed to you. This is the action on the right-hand side that previous hearing body had taken. Permanent removal. So the logic here is there's a number of signs in our jurisdiction because we have 2 big freeways, right? So instead of having a lot of clutter, it'd be kind of good to get rid of a few of them. And so part of this deal between the city and Lamar is to reduce the number of billboards in our community. And so the logic behind this is although we're going to increase them to LEDs, we're going to reduce the number of facilities in our corridor. I didn't want that to be lost. So on the right-hand side is a vicinity map. I want to walk you through the 3 locations. Again, these are existing billboards. One of them on the lower part of the vicinity map, that's on a private property at the end of Golden Gate Circle. That's a little bit north of the Auto Mall area, just west of the freeway if you drive up and down there. A little bit more north on the east side of 15, there's 2 properties with existing signs, and so we're going to walk you through those locations. Our commissioner tonight owns property that's close to the middle site. He's within 400 feet, so good for transparency laws and getting it right. We always like to make sure that if one of your commission owns property or is near a site that we let you know in advance. Okay, so for the first site, this is to replace an existing facility. The rendering on the right-hand side shows you the ultimate height, which would be 57 feet. What's interesting is that the road grade level starts at around 8 feet. So technically, you have about a 49-foot tall sign, visually, if you will. But I just want to give you the optics on the location and the height and scale there. This one's a little bit bigger, and I'm going to tell you why. This one's up to 85 feet. From a road level, though, it's at about 47 feet. I'm going to walk you through what happened here. Very much has to do with the Caltrans Freeway flyover expansion project that we've seen grow over the last year and a half in our area. Kind of made a few signs redundant and not able to be seen. So that's one of the issues here that they're addressing. And then the third sign, another existing sign on a hill. They're going to retain that at the same type of level height at 47 feet. And this slide is to show you why they have to increase that to 85 feet. So if you look at the upper right-hand corner, in the yellow, that's the current sign, and the rendering is the higher one. But as you can see, the freeway itself is blocking the entirety of the sign. So whether you're north or southbound, you wouldn't be able to see it today. And so they're generally just asking for them to get to a height level by which drivers using the freeway can see the sign going both north and south. But I just wanted to show you the dramatic increase in height that road, that flyover did. It's pretty significant, so that's why you're seeing something that high. But I'll tell you, I've worked on many, many cell towers in my day. 85 feet was about average for a cell tower. It sounds like a 7-8-story building, but when you look at a vertical element, they're pretty normal to be at 57 to 85 feet. Just wanted to let you know that that's not odd to see in the jurisdiction. Biology and lighting. Now, these properties are all within a cell, and a cell is meaning it's a special biological attribute with our Regional Conservation Authority. So when you're in those cells, you're probably going to have to dedicate some open space. In looking at these 3 sites and the 3 cells that they're in, they are not in areas that are required to be proposed for open space. They don't have habitat type that would be adversely impacted by the trenching and the pole mount. And so we have taken a look into the biological history on that one. The other part of biology, though, is that these are 24/7. These don't go off at 10 at night. They're on all night. And so you think about avian species and plant types and mammals. How do they go through an area when it's lit up? Well, one would think that it's lit up, but I wanted to show you a video that the applicant provided. This video is somewhere in Florida for a site that had some other attributes here, but I'm going to, if this works. No, it didn't. But Jace is here tonight, and he promised to take good care of me. So many times, you know, when you're worried about lighting itself, right, you worry about the side view or below it. And from a biological lens, this is a site in Florida that's near a wetland estuary, and it's also near a retirement community. So you had 2 concerns. People worried about a new sign with LED in their area, and also for biology, how does this work? And so as you approach the sign, you can't see it on, but pretty soon you're gonna start to see the technology where when you're facing the sign itself, then you start to see it. But you will not have a view on the side, below, or from the top. And I'll shut up for a minute, just let you see this. So I'm happy to say that my #1 concern was aesthetics, people living in their homes 5 miles away, seeing this giant, monitor on all night, and biology. With this technology, which will be applied with these sites, I don't see any impacts to biology. And I think the typical concerns about lighting impacts to side views is addressed with this technology. But I want to take a moment for you guys to absorb this, that there's a way with advanced technology to address other issues that I didn't think were easy before. So with the height, 40 feet off the ground, with direct lighting standards now, We're not seeing the impacts of yesterday, but I want to let you know that we were careful to take a look into the typical impacts that one might see with these types of facilities. And so with that, staff have reviewed the proposed plans and determined that these reconstructed billboards that are subject to an agreement would not be detrimental to the surrounding areas, which is residential, business, and open space. And that per the terms that this commission has already approved, it does have the controls in place that will make sure that it won't become a problem over the years. And here's with my recommendations. I recommend to open the public hearing and receive public comments. Find that the action exempt from CEQA, our environmental regulations at the state level. And if you could approve the attached resolution recommending that the City Council approve the proposed development agreement, attach an exhibit to the resolution. And with that, Scott and I are available for any questions.
Okay, Commissioner DeSena, do you have any questions of staff?
With the elevation of these, obviously they're there already. Does it make it increased, like, how do I say this? Visibility for homes in that area? Like like somebody in their backyard now will see it as opposed to before they wouldn't see it?
No, thank you, Commissioner. I took a drive around in that neighborhood. Mostly what you're seeing is commercial and office types of businesses. There might be some limited views in Temecula from some of their newer residential areas, but those are new residential areas that were supposed to go in commercial areas. So I would say that based on existing zoning for our community, there's not current residential impacts. Those are to the side, which is perfect because the screens are oriented towards the traffic, and that's all just straight north and south. So I don't think that I had observed any adverse potential impacts to any residential view sheds in the area.
Okay, thanks for the video, because that actually made it pretty neat to see that it's not visible from the sides. It's only if you're looking directly on. That's pretty cool technology. So thank you.
They spent a lot of money on that technology to, not just in the technology, but the video they did on the cell phone to send to us. It was pretty expensive.
I appreciate that. So just for clarification, so there's 3 sites. Each of them are being transitioned to either change the height, but because they're getting more space, billboard space, and rotating ads, those type of things like that, they don't need as many signs. So how many other signs are we actually losing? What's our...
In aggregate, we're going to lose 3 signs. So
Okay,
they're going to end up with a total of 4 digital eventually, with 7 total billboards coming down, static billboards coming down.
Okay, so 7 coming down, 3 new ones. But what's the net loss or?
Net loss is 3.
Okay, net loss is 3.
There will be a 4th digital billboard in the future, but that's not here today.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so there'll be another one.
At a site that's not prepared, yeah.
Okay, I got it. Okay. And then, since obviously the city's involved, so with Lamar, is there any, what's the advantage as far as the city? Do we get any billboard space, promotional type of things? And then also, how often do the ads get circulated? Is it every 5 seconds, 10? What is it?
I believe the circulation is 8 seconds, and that's a Caltrans law.
Okay.
We created a relocation agreement that came before your Planning Commission and Council in 2022. And with that agreement, the city is going to receive revenues both for the installation of the signs, but also an ongoing, basically a commission agreement with a base level that it can't go below. So the city will gain revenues from the signage, and will also gain the ability to put up PSAs and announcements for the city. So we'll both have advertising time on the signs, but also revenue from the signs.
Nice. So different civic events and things that the city wants to promote for whatever purposes, or things that are obviously our birthday celebration or other events here at Town Square Park and things like that, we're able to actually add that promotional information on those billboards, or the memorials that we have out back here as well too.
Yes, this should be a great benefit to our PIO.
Okay, very good. I don't have any other questions of staff. Is anybody from Lamar here that wants to?
Not tonight, but we met with them within the last week.
Okay. Just, well, I don't have anything more. I guess we make a recommendation.
We just need to open the public hearing just in
that's right.
case.
Yep. Okay, so at this
Sure.
point in time, I'm going to open up the public hearing. The time is 7:54. Madam Secretary, do we have anybody wishing to speak?
Seeing none.
Okay, with that, then we will close the public hearing. It's now 7:55. And with that, then I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
As recommended by staff, and I'll, if you make a motion, I will second the motion, and I will ask Mr. Steele to read the recommendation so we don't lose it in translation.
Yes, sir. If it pleases the chair. So the staff recommendation was to open the public hearing, receive public comments. We did that. Find the action is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to sections 15302 and 15303 as described in the staff report and the resolution, and approve the attached resolution recommending the City Council approve the proposed development agreement attached as the exhibit to the resolution. The development agreement will authorize the relocation and reconstruction of billboards subject to an approved relocation agreement.
With that, let's register our votes.
Motion passes 2-0 with the recusal of Commissioner LaPaglia.
Okay, with that, that concludes this item. Moves us on to city planner comments.
Appreciate that, Chair. Appreciate the commission tonight moving these items forward. We really appreciate your being here. I don't have a whole lot coming up in the queue. I anticipate we probably don't have anything for the next meeting, so just to let you know, but I'll keep you in the loop. And appreciate your time. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Chair.
With that, city attorney comments.
Nothing for me. Thank you for having me again.
Okay. Planning Commission, it's either you or me. So any comments?
I have none.
Okay, I have none either. So with that, looking for consensus to adjourn. Mike?
Consensus to adjourn?
All right.
Aye.
Yeah, that's right. Mike and Dennis here. All right, done. Meeting is over at 7:57.